Hi, this is Ken from Cadimage, and in this session we're going to run through an introduction to Cadimage Objective. Objective is one of our 7 tools they offer as part of the subscription series, and unlike some of the other tools like stairs or doors and windows or cabinets or coverings, where the name kind of gives away what the tool does, Objective is a little bit different. Objective can be used for a number of things, but it offers lots and lots of features that are beneficial when it comes to editing objects. A typical example is if you have a chair or a table or something you need to be slightly off the horizontal, it's not easy to do that in the standard library, whereas Objective gives us the possibilities to modify these objects and use them in different ways. We can also chop up and we can bend and we can offset and we can extrude and we can do slab edges and a whole host of other things. So it's actually quite tricky to pin a label on what Objective does. But what I'm going to do is go through, I've got a list of things here. We're going to look first of all at what we can do with objects, then we'll look at the tools, then we'll take a look at the extrusion side of things, and finally we'll take a look at slab edges. So the first thing, as I said, I'm going to take a look at is the objects that are part of Objective. So what I've done here is just piece together something that shows a very brief selection of some of the timber and some of the steel work. But what you'll see is, if we go back, there's the beam underneath, these are some of the objects, you can see how they behave. We have a framing tool, and this forms part of Objective, so let's just grab that. What you'll see here is we have a library, so we have some modelling components, we haven't come to that yet. We have some steel work, and if I grab something like, let's scroll slightly, a steel column, we have what are called presets, and these give us the option to actually come in here and pick from some of the British standards, some of the New Zealand standards, and some of the US standards. So I can grab a typical British standard universal column. What that does then is offer this further menu that allows me to go and choose a standard column size. So if I go for 203 by 203 by 46, then you can actually see that automatically populates all these fields with the properties appropriate to that particular column. The same is true if we go for a New Zealand or a US standard. We can pick from the list of components in there. Although the Objective tools are separate to the standard object tool, the placement and the various other bits and pieces over the control of it, you can see it's very similar to standard objects and it behaves in a similar way. The difference is, if we were to go to the framing tool and we do a select all, then it will select all of the framing components, rather than if we go to the object tool, it would select all the generic objects. If I was to just have a quick play around with these, so let's just grab that, and we'll also grab this, pull it out of here, we'll take these two and we will pull them down here somewhere. We have one of the tools which allows us to do alignment. So I can actually take them all and align them all on the centre of the y-axis. And what that does, as you can see, is it goes and positions them all nice and aligned on the centre of those beams that were placed top and bottom. As well as this, when it comes to working with timber frames and these sort of components, we also have the option to create an assembly. So you'll see if I select this, it actually appears as a group. But in fact what it is if we look at the Objective menu and assembly, we actually have an assembly selected, and we have a couple of options with it that become quite useful. So if I was to say maybe work on, let's just grab this whole thing, have a look at 3D, we can see how it's positioned. Maybe if I was to put a doorway in here and I wanted to put in some other mullions and transoms and different bits and pieces, rather than trying to work on the plan view, it'd be much more useful to lay it flat and work on it there. That's even more important when it comes to working on something like a roof, which is an odd angle that we can't easily switch between a plan and an elevation view. But what we can do with this is select the assembly, and we have two options. We have an option to go to plan or go to model. So if I go to plan view, what that does is essentially flip it round and flatten it to the horizontal angle that I want to work on. So I'm then free to come in, pick up, stretch and move and do whatever I have to do to adjust things. And then at any point, I'll just select this, we can go back in and go back to the model view. And what that does is flip it back up and put it into position. Now with one very odd, sticky out piece of column. So that's a brief look at the objects. If we then move on and start to look at some of the tools, we have a whole range of different options here. So what I've placed is just a standard old designer chair. So nothing particularly special, straight out of the library, standard object. What we can do with it is actually pick it up. We have a tools option here and we can rotate. So I can say, take that point, from there, let's spin it round just at a rough angle. And what you'll see is the projection now changes and we're looking at the projected plan view now that this thing's been rotated by whatever angle I happen to choose. So if we select it again, have another look at 3D, you can see it's now tilting backwards. Another option for this is rather than rotate it in a plan view, is let's switch to an elevation. So here's a coloured elevation, similar chair, and what I'm going to do is select it again, use exactly the same command, and we're going to rotate it here and we'll spin it around, there you go, 56 degrees. And you can see straight away how it's spun around. So we're not restricted to work just in plan view. As well as rotating, we can also split objects. So we can actually go in here, split. I can just define a line at random here through this component. Obviously you can do it more precisely. Choose a side to keep selected, and then simply drag it out of the way. And what I actually end up with is two chairs. But the really key thing to this is I can pick this one up, and even though I've chopped it up, it's not a morph, it's not converted into anything else, it's still a chair. I can actually come in here, we can go to the surfaces, and let's just make some changes. So I'm just randomly picking other colours to see how this might appear. Let's make that bright yellow. Okay, that. And now you can see we have this truly wonderful chair. The other thing we can do is, if we've decided to chop something up and make a real mess of it, at any point in time, I can select them, and we can tell it to remove the cuts. And what that does is revert it back to its original object type. So that's a big advantage over using something like the Morph tool in standard ArchiCAD, because with the Morph tool, you can never go back to the original element type. Where this comes in really pretty handy is rather than chopping chairs up, because that's a tad random, what we can do is take a look at an example like this. So I've got some steel work. Let's have a look in 3D. And you'll see what I've done is I've corrected these corners. I've added the splits so that this now connects properly, but I haven't yet done the other side. So if I go back, it's a case simply of pick up the component, and I am going to split there at 45 degrees, keep that side selected and then delete it. Same here, split, same 45 degrees, keep that side selected, delete that piece, and now when I go back to 3D, you'll see this far corner is now corrected. So I'm not going to carry on and do the last one, I think you get the idea of how it works, but that's really quite a useful example. Other thing that's quite useful, and this is taking a side step away from the file I'm working with here, but if I go into the lamp tool, I can come in here, grab a fluorescent lamp, drop that down in the middle here, pick it up, and then just do a quick rotate. So I'm just going to rotate at a small angle, like so, and what you'll see is, if we go back to 3D view, we now have a slightly off-kilter lamp, but the beauty of this is still a lamp, and it still behaves as a lamp with all the appropriate settings. So it's a big advantage over the standard methods. So getting back on track, I'm now going to look at the bend option, and that's simply a case of we grab, generally it's a linear extruded component, and we have a tools option here, we can just bend and we can rotate that around. Clearly what I'm going to have to do is, once I've done something like this, we bend this one out as well, we're going to have to look at these intersections and how they connect and how they adjust, because it's not going to work right now. But hopefully you can see this is a useful addition to the standard functionality. Offset's another useful one. What it allows me to do is actually take objects and offset them vertically. So what I can do is select this beam that's running across here. This could be anything. It could be an extrusion that's like a car park ramp or something like that. It could be curved. It could be pretty much any, as long as it's some form of extruded shape as I've got here. And what I can do with it is just grab the tools and tell it just to offset it. And we just bring it down and line it up across over here. So that's a brief taster of the tools. There's then extrusions and still slab edges to look at. As you can see, there's a lot in here. If we take a look at profiles, a couple of things just to note before we actually get into them too deeply. We have two options. We can either use a fill pattern and that will create a completely solid extruded shape, or we can use a polyline, and what that'll do is create a hollow shape. So depending on what we're going to use it for, we might want different results if it's just a sheet element or if it's going to be some sort of solid thing, as I've done here. What I'll do though, the process is very simple. If I use this one, I'm going to create a cornice. We select the fill, we go to the component menu, and we're going to create a new profile type. We have a few options in here. We can create elevation sections, and we can also create lathed objects, which are rotated or revolved objects. But in this case, it's an extrusion I want to produce, and it's not a cable tray. It's going to be Ken's ceiling molding thingy. So I'm giving it a really detailed technical name. We can choose where it goes, either in the ArchiCAD library or more sensibly in the embedded library. Once it's in there, that can then be extracted for other projects, etc. But we then have another couple of options. I can either place the new profile, don't actually want to do that yet, I'm going to move to a different view, or we can delete the selected item. So I actually want to leave that fill there for now because I'm just going to click one more click and then I'm finished. So I've okayed that. The next thing we have to do is tell it where the anchor point is. So this is going to be anchored to that top corner, and that's it. There's nothing to actually see there just now, but you'll see if we look in the bottom of the toolbox here, I've got framing, which we've already looked at the objects there. We also have extrusions, and we also have slab edges to come on to. But if I go into extrusions, what you'll see is there's Ken's really technical name. That's it, ready to go. There's settings we can look at. We can change the surfaces, so let's make it something visible. Tend to go for yellow because you can't miss it. We can play with the pen settings, and there's also an option there to go to help on the website. There's further options in path, which determines if the shape is rotated in any way, what the deviation is from curves, anchor points, various bits, but we'll come back to those. So to actually place this, there's just a very simple click, click, click. There's a very simple path, and now we have our extruded profile. So we'll come on and take another look at that. The next example I was going to look at was something a little bit more practical, so I've got a couple of examples to work with in a building I'm about to look at, and that's a cable tray. So again, this is just purely a fill pattern, nothing at all special about it. I've created the shape, and what I'm going to do is select, go through the same process, new profile, and we'll call it Ken's cable tray. Same process, okay that. The difference here is the anchor point, I'm actually going to go to the middle here. This is 80mm deep, and what I'm going to do is offset that, let's say 200 above this whole shape. Now what that means is when I go to anchor this and place it, I can basically draw to the ceiling level and know that the guideline there gives me a handy guide for where the ceiling would be, but we know we've got space where this is going to hang and people can have access to actually put the cables and things into the tray. In terms of drawing, I've got a couple of options. Let's go back to the extrusion tool, and we will stick with this profile that I've created already. And what we'll do is just freehand. We will draw around this particular room here. Now you'll see as I start to draw, this extrusion placement palette appears, and if you've had a look at the steer tool, it's similar in some ways. The first part's certainly similar. We've got the choice to work between straight edges or curved edges, and we can determine those in different ways. We also have an option here to change the height. I'm going to just leave that as it is, bring that around, finish off here. We click twice to finish, and there is my shape. probably should have checked the height. Let's have a look at the 3D. Let's see what it looks like. Yep, you can probably notice a classic ArchiCAD mistake. You wouldn't think I've been using this software for nearly 20 years, but I forgot to change the height. So let's make that 2.5 meters above ground. And now we have a ceiling moulding rather than what it was previously, subterranean anyway. So you can see we now have that shape traced around the contours of that room. If you want to do true freehand, then I can carry on here. We can just simply click to start. We'll have some straight edges. What I'm doing is defining the outside edge because that's where the hotspot was. We'll have maybe a curve that comes around like so. Back to another straight edge. And then if I make a mistake, what I can do is backspace, and that takes me back through whatever number of previous points. Click there, standard ArchiCAD practices. If I click again on that point, that finishes and completes the shape. You can see we now have this wonderful new moulding. However, we do actually have another option available. Get rid of the marquee. What we can do here is trace a polyline. So let's not make the same rookie mistake. We want this to be 2/500 above ground. That's going to attach it to, right now, an imaginary ceiling because there isn't actually one on this building, but you want to be able to see into it, so that helps. So I've set that to 2.5. Let's change the materials and let's not go for that. Let's go for red this time. So something again that's going to stand out. Okay, so this time what I'm going to do is a polyline trace, and I've actually, if I just hold down Shift and highlight, you can see the blue line. That's a polyline that I've already placed that I'm going to use to trace this extrusion around. So all I do is literally come in here, hold down my spacebar, give that a click, and now we have that cable tray running all the way around the building. Have a quick look at 3D, and you can see how it runs. So obviously there's a few issues that we're going to have to bodge some holes through the walls and things, and my cornicing has now been chopped up. So that's a little bit annoying, but another way to do this, of course, is if I grab the extrusion tool again, and I'm just going to freehand draw this time. So let's take a tray coming from here somewhere, we'll bring it across to about here. We're at 2.5 meters. Let's take that up to 3,000. And we will take that to 250 mil, and then go to 0. We'll take that through to the other side of the wall. We'll drop that back to 2,500. We'll take it around here, and then we'll just bring it through to this room here somewhere. So what that actually enables me to do, if we look at 3D again, is actually go and bridge over some of these bits. Now obviously I need to spend a bit more time because I've kind of randomly done it, but it does give us a lot more control over the way this is placed to be able to do these sort of things. The other thing we can do is, once we've actually created, we're not necessarily finished. So if I go back to this shape here, with it selected, we can go into the settings and we can actually use graphic editing. And again, there's similar tools in our steer tool. So the first one here is allowing me to edit the nodes. And you'll see extra points appear on the midpoints here. What these allow me to do is pick up and actually add completely new nodes. So we can just pull that out, it's continuing the curve there. Let's go up here. We can take that off up to here somewhere. We can take an existing corner and I can actually pull that up, and we can use our standard constraints, so the shift key or the guidelines or whatever it is, and we can actually pick these up and move the whole thing around. So we can move the start point, whatever we need to do with it. The other option in there is to go and switch on curved editing, or just arcs as it's called. And what that does is let me do these little things. so we can pull the shapes around. The last thing to look at on here is we've actually got the option to extract the profile. So once I've made something like this, there might be a variation, particularly in the cable tray. There might be ones that are narrower or wider or deeper or whatever it is. I can select one of these, and I don't want to draw the whole thing again. I might have lost the original shape. So I can take any one of these, and we can just actually come up to the component menu, and I can just tell it to extract the profile. And what that does is bring it out, allow me to place it. We can do the same here. Extract that profile, put it back down there. So I'm actually able to take these as their original fill types and play with them and turn them into something else. So that's the extrusion tool. The final thing to take a look at are our slab edges. And quick note on this first, it's just the placement. So if I grab Slab Edge tool, I'm going to use some favourites. So this sets up the one I want to use. And we're going to have a difference here depending on whether I pick an edge. You'll see that does just one corner. We haven't set the end conditions, so right now it's filtering because it knows the angles of the adjoining edges, etc. But if I do an undo, and this time pick on a point, then what you'll see is it does the whole shape. So that's one key thing to bear in mind. I've then got some examples of the different types of slab edge that we have. Because if I look at the tool, you'll see there's actually 5 available. So there's the counter edge, the counter upstand, the footing, the rebate, and then the steps. So on the counter edge, rather than go through the whole thing, I've just set up a couple of examples here. This one's a finished one, so it looks all nice and smooth and blended and connected and all nice and cool. In fact, what we have here is a slab. So the cabinet, I've just set these for glass because I'm not too interested in what they look like. But all I've done is draw a slab on top, and then we've added an upstand and an edge. And that's it. There's various options we can actually set here for square tops or angled or filleted, same for the edges. So again, I've set them up with my favourite bright yellow colour, just so you can see them. In terms of control, there are some hotspots. And we can use these to either change the height in the case of the upstands, or we can change the width, the depth, or whatever you want to call it, in the case of the counter edge. If I take a look at the footing, there's actually 4 types of footing, which on plan they all look pretty much identical. Okay, there's a few extra lines in some of these. If we take a look at a section, then you can start to see how they actually apply. So again, there is a slab in each case, and we've attached the slab edge, and what that does is create these objects based around that shape to give us whatever profile. Behind these, if I go into the settings, there's a number of things to control. So we can control the type, which are these ones here. We can control the depths, the widths, the thicknesses. We can control the base shapes and sizes. And we can also control the end conditions. So if this was just one edge, then maybe we would cut square or align with adjacent, depending on what it's going to be used for as a final product. So I'll cancel that. We also have a rebate option. So here we have looks like a couple of slabs. If we look at 3D, in actual fact, what it is just one slab that's rebated. On the edge of this, if I just select all slabs, all slab edges, we can go in and we can do things like, let's just maybe double that. We'll make that doubled as well. We don't actually need to change the end conditions. We can change the materials and the pens, etc. But what you'll see is that changes the shape. The nice thing to this is we're not using any sort of operators or any additional elements on the slabs. It is just still one slab, but we're able to chop it up with the Slab Edge tool here. Here's some examples of steps. There are 2 types, steps that either rise from the slab top or steps that fall away from the slab top. If we look at 3D, it's a little bit easier to understand what's going on. So we have a square with nosings, we have vertical risers, and we have angled risers. Got some examples to place here, so we're going to go with the footing first. So I've got a favourite set up, and this just applies the geometry that I want to use. And it's simply a case of we select this, we either click on an edge if I want just that one edge. So I want the whole thing, so I'm going to go for a corner, a point, and that does the whole thing. So you can see in 3D how it appears. We could also take a cut through it, and then you can see the shape underneath there. The other thing to point out, if I actually go back, grab the original slab, and just do a simple offset. So let's grab that, move it up by 500mm. You'll see the whole thing actually stretches and repairs and updates and does its thing. The only thing I have to be careful of is the usual sort of ArchiCAD things where if we extend a curve and the geometry is a little bit too tight, we have to be a little bit careful that the corners can still connect. But it's a very flexible tool. So that example I was going to look at was put some stairs in, and we've got this odd looking geometry. It'll make sense in a minute what's actually going on here, but I've got a slab underneath. We have two slabs in fact, and then we have some walls, and I'm sure you can all guess what this is going to be. As soon as I select this, I see the nice tile blue mosaic that's going on here. This probably gives the game away, and what I can do is just again pick on a corner, and off it goes and places all the steps. So those look like this, and the actual end result is a very pretty swimming pool. The water does look a bit on the choppy side, but you can see it's just an example of another use for the slab edge. Probably not your everyday thing, but you know, it might come in handy at some point. So that's the final part of Objective to take a look at. It's a bit of a taster of all the tools. As you can probably see from here, there's a wide variety of different tool types and functions that Objective actually provides, but hopefully this gives you a taster. So thanks for taking the time to watch. If you want any more information on the tools, you can take a look at our main website, which is cadimage.com. And for access to the objects and downloads related to ArchiCAD, you can create an account if you don't already have one on mycadimage.com. Thanks for your time.